If you want to build a guitar yourself, you're probably going to want to watch this. We're now finished with the build itself, and I want to go back to some of the problems I've come across and see how I've dealt with them. These are typical issues that you may encounter and will want to fix yourself. Some are just funny, so stay with me. Let's fix a guitar. Hi, I'm Yoav and this is the Electric Luthier. Today we'll take a look at the build and see what went wrong. As I've mentioned before, accidents did happen and mistakes were made. There are many reasons things can go wrong. Lack of experience is surely a big one, as I assume one does not keep repeating the same mistakes over and over. I'll also assume that if you're watching this, you're not a professional luthier yet, and if you like experimenting with new tools and techniques as I do, you'll always find new first times to do many things. Other reasons for mistakes or accidents can be attributed to the tools and materials you use. A dull blade, the wrong bit, an inaccurate ruler, or poor quality materials will not help. And then you have methodology, being organized, being focused or unfocused, and sheer stupidity when you find no other excuse. The reason may be important for the next time, but excuses will not fix my guitar. So let's jump in and see what went wrong. All you need is one wrong move with the sander, and I made a little gash in the template. This little dent will be copied to the body and pretty much renders this template useless. But will fixing it take more or less time and effort than making a new one? Since MDF dust is one of the finer dusts, it's a great candidate for a SuperGlue fix. All I need is some MDF dust, which I have plenty of now, when building a template, and SuperGlue. By the way, when I say SuperGlue, I'm referring to a range of CR or cyanoacrylate glues, which can also come under a range of names like Krazy Glue, Loctite, Minute Glue, some types of Gorilla Glue, and many more if you go international. MDF also soaks the SuperGlue when applied, so you know you'll get good contact. Then you simply alternate the sawdust and more SuperGlue to build a layer. In order to avoid my finger sticking to the template, I try and always put way too much dust, so there's a dry layer on top on which I can press. But actually using practically anything other than your finger would be smarter. Once there is enough material there, just sand it to the desired shape. I was planning on creating another version of the template anyway, so I tested on another piece of MDF. I had a few accidents on my fretboard as well. It seems Indian rosewood may not be as strong as I thought. I'm kidding. I've actually managed to chip two places on opposite ends and use two separate methods to fix them. On the headstock side, I see that since I made a slightly oversized nut, I've left too thin of a strip beyond the nut. It may have been enough for a thinner nut, and maybe if I was a bit more careful, but when I carved out the nut slot, the thin tip just broke off into a few little pieces. I kept the little pieces, finished the carving not to risk breaking them again, and got to gluing. Using SuperGlue and the little pieces of wood literally demands surgical precision, so I turned to sharp scalpel blades and surgical pincers. You also want to keep your fingers away from the SuperGlue. I do not want to become one with the guitar. If you manage to save all the chips as I did, then it's really just about placing them in the right position, putting a dab of SuperGlue and putting some pressure for a few seconds. Thicker viscosity SuperGlue and maybe an accelerator spray may have made it quicker, if not easier, but a bit of patience will also do the trick. Carefully and swiftly wiping the excess glue with some cloth will help with the glue stain. We want to avoid having to sand afterwards, as this area was pretty much finished before I broke it. If you had all the pieces, you may be able to make a seamless fix. If not, which is what happened to me at the heel, you'll need to rebuild some Indian rosewood. Here again, I'll be using the combination of SuperGlue and dust, which can be used to fix multiple parts of the guitar. Any type of fine grain such as sawdust or filling of both wood or plastic can be soaked with SuperGlue to create rock-solid chunks of whatever you need. I've used it with MDF before and on templates, and now with rosewood as well. I'm not sure exactly how and when this tip broke off. I think it was when I sawed the heel off, but I never saw where the little piece went. I'm going for a rebuild here. I'll first tape off the maple surrounding and the areas I want to protect. I make a little pile of rosewood sawdust I kept when radiusing the fretboard. I try and keep fine sawdust of every wood I use, and by now I have a small collection of various wood colors. Then I put a drop or two of SuperGlue and then some sawdust. I wait for it to dry and repeat until it looks like I have piled it high enough. Let it dry for a bit, and then you can just sand it to be smooth and in the same shape as the original. The SuperGlue soaks into the fine dust and becomes a solid piece of whichever color sawdust you had. It might be a bit darker and it will not have the same grain texture, but with a small area and a dark rosewood, you may get an almost seamless result. Oh, and please hit the subscribe button and the little notification bell beside it to get notified when the next video comes out. And do come and check my website, theelectricluthier.com, with plenty of more articles on guitar building and more related stuff. The next two have to do with drilling and screw issues. There's a fine balance between the size of the pre-drilled hole, the type or hardness of the wood, the size of the screw, and the amount of force you need to use. This fine line gets more critical with very small screws. It gets worse with low quality screws. Obviously, if the hole you pre-drilled is too large, you will very easily strip it. But even with the correct size, you may apply too much force and strip it, or apply enough force for the hole size and end up stripping the screw head. This is often indicative of low quality material. When I installed the tuners, I drilled the holes to the correct size, and when screwing them in place, I felt they were not stripped yet, but really on the edge there for a couple of screws. I didn't want to add a toothpick or anything else which will actually make the hole smaller, but I did want to give it some reinforcement. So I mixed a bit of sawdust with regular Titebond glue and put some in the holes. This will not feel different right now, but should provide that extra strength when it dries. So if I tighten it just a bit more in a month or a year from now, it will have resistance and not strip it. Another option is to put a drop of SuperGlue in the hole. Just be careful not to make a mess. I haven't tried it myself, and I'm sure it does the job. The only issue could be too good a connection if and when you will want to remove it. When screwing in the bridge, one of the screw heads started stripping and bending. The last thing you want is a broken screw stuck in a hole you need to fill. I managed to screw it out with a little help from pliers. Since the hole size was okay, I think I may need to get into the habit of using wax with some of the screws and maybe get better quality screws as well. This next one has to do with attention as well as proper use of a router. Router accidents can be some of the worst for either you or the guitar. I always say that these fast rotating blades can do a lot of damage very quickly. The simple act of copying the template to the neck nearly destroyed the neck. A split second of distraction and a little tilt of the router is all you need. Fortunately, this particular gash was not deep enough and was removed when I rounded the back of the neck. This could have been avoided in one of two simple ways. One, use the same router as a table router. Just install it upside down on the table. You may need a different router bit with a bearing at the other tip, but the table itself will provide the stability you need. Two, just pay more attention and move the router away if you need to do any moving or repositioning. After a few unfortunate experiences with double-sided tape, I discovered the SuperGlue masking tape method. When I say discovered, I mean watched Ben Crow explain it on the Crimson Guitars channel. The idea is brilliant in its simplicity and is also easy enough to pull off. Well, what could go wrong? Easy. You can just overdo it. When you're switching and experimenting with cheap glues, you're not always sure exactly how much is too much. You actually need very little. Here you can see me struggling with my own generosity. If you need a screwdriver to detach your template, you've overdone it. It's even funnier in high speed. Now, excuses and rationalizations are very important when we realize we make mistakes. Otherwise, we are either incompetent or just plain stupid. I'm sure some of you who've watched the whole build may have noticed it before me. Halfway through clear coating the neck, I've noticed something off with the shape. It was a Telecaster shape, not a Tele. I can probably draw most common headstock shapes in my sleep, and somehow I managed to build it, put a fretboard on it, and pretty much finish it without noticing. I did manage to trace the mistake back to some idiot in my workshop, I wonder who that could be, who marked the Strat neck template as a Telecaster. From there, it just snowballed. Well, this will not do. Since I'm not planning on a Strat in the near future, I decided to convert the headstock to a Tele style. I printed an appropriate headstock and started matching it. Some compromises will have to be made, but I managed to fit it. From here, again, it's some filing and a lot of sanding till it looks and feels right. And last but not least, our paint runs. I had a couple of runs and slight puddles in the first couple of coats. You can clearly see one nice drop and a bit of a longer, shallower puddle. One option is to sand it down to the wood and just redo it. The other is to try and sand down just the excess to be level with the rest. The risk, of course, is that you sand down the surrounding unintentionally. There are a few methods, and since I'm planning on a few more coats anyway, I decided to go with the quick and easy one using masking tape. I cover everything except the bump and start working very locally with a small block and a 400 grit paper. After I remove the majority of the thickness from the little drop, I remove the masking tape, which is by itself too thick now. I have some tackiness from both the masking tape and the polyurethane, and I clean it up with some turpentine or white spirit. I now have to gently sand a wider area